Elegant, iconic, glamorous, space age, a thing of power and beauty, the most stunning plane ever made. I could go on, but of course I'm talking about Concorde. 40 years today since it made its first commercial flight from London to Bahrain. It went on to fly for 27 years to destinations like New York, Washington, Barbados, Hong Kong. It was retired in 2003, 3 years after an Air France Concorde crashed just outside Paris, killing everyone on board. But for nearly 3 decades, it was the epitome of glamour. And would you believe, if you wanted to, you could have chartered it. One man who did want to and went and did it, Stephen Bath, the man who used to own and run the famous travel agents Bath Traveller in Salisbury, and he used a Wiltshire airfield for the trips. He joins us now. Good morning, Stephen.
Morning, Jonathan.
Lovely to talk to you, and thank you for being with us on this anniversary. What gave you the idea to do a trip and get it to take off from Boscombe?
Well, we started chartering Concorde when Bournemouth Airport's runway was extended in 1996. And as soon as we started doing it, we could see it was a real winner. And we had done about 4 or 5 charters with 300 people a day when I decided that what would be rather nice would be to see if we could fly a Concorde to New York from the south of England. Obviously, Bath Travel had lots and lots of branches in the central south. And the trouble was that Bournemouth Airport's runway was too short for Concorde to take off to New York. It was perfectly capable of flying to places like Paris and Venice and Spain, but it could not reach New York because...
Why? Oh, so I was going to ask you why, yeah.
Well, a Concorde was a very heavy aircraft. It weighed 95 tons empty, but incredibly, it carried its own weight in fuel, which was another 95 tons. And in order to get a 190-ton full Concorde off the ground, you need a runway about 2 miles, 2.5 miles long for it to accelerate. Bournemouth Airport was relatively short, so we could take off for Rome and Paris, but we couldn't reach New York. So I looked around.
And so you came up with Boscombe. How willing were the authorities to allow you to use it?
Initially, they thought I was a crank caller. A man here claims he's got a Concorde, boss. I don't think he does, no. Anyway, eventually, it took me some time to reach the senior person. And the reason that I discovered the idea of Boscombe Down was that I've always had a pilot's licence. I've been flying little planes for 35 years out of Bournemouth. And when you go further north, 30 miles north, you come to an area which is a danger area. It's hashed out in red on the map, and you can never go into these areas ever. And Boscombe Down has a big chunk of that. And because it's a secret establishment, it tests, flies all sorts of strange military aircraft, and it's not for the public gaze, and certainly light planes can't go near there and could never ever land. So I knew it was there. I could see it in the distance, but I knew it had a very, very long runway, and that was why I thought, well, we've always had a Bath Travel in Salisbury and Amesbury and all around the area, so this is still Bath Travel's patch. If I can get them to let me use their airport, I'm in, and it'll work.
And so eventually you got the go-ahead, but and you have this, and I've actually got in front of me, you sent us this, we flew supersonic from Salisbury to New York, and there's this marvellous view of people in the pub, and I think I'm right in saying the check-in was actually at the bar of the pub.
That's right, yes. Amongst the many problems I had to overcome, Jonathan, to make this happen, was the issue of the fact that the airport commander, which is a government facility, said, well, you can use our runway because we love Concorde, same as everybody else, but we haven't even got any toilets. There's no buildings, there's no shelter. It's men in white coats and top-secret planes. So you're going to have to find somewhere to check them in. So I got into my car and drove north and drove around for all morning, getting no and yes, and other people thinking I was some sort of crank person. And eventually a lovely Italian man at the inn at High Post at Amesbury said yes, yes and yes. And it was only about a 1 mile drive to Boscombe Down. And the man said, yes, we could use the facilities. There were large spaces. They had a grand piano, a bar, lots of parking, rooms where passengers could stay. So that turned the key, and that allowed me to use the inn at High Post, about 2 miles north of Salisbury, as our check-in facility.
Just amazing. And there's the picture there of the coach that you use there to ferry the people from the pub to Concorde, parked right next to it.
Yes, the there were various restrictions put on our operation. First of all, obviously, there are a lot of experimental aircraft, military aircraft, and the public are not allowed to see them. They're top secret. So one of the conditions that our passengers had to fulfill was that they were not allowed to have a camera on them. They couldn't take any pictures. So what happened, I had 2 Excelsior coaches, and we shuttled the passengers out 35 at a time, because the aircraft takes 100 passengers, so it's 33, 33 and 33, and one by one, allowing them 5 minutes each to unload. They drove straight from the inn at High Post, straight through the gates of the secret establishment, parked at the bottom of the steps, and of course the coach drivers from Excelsior were completely made up about it, and they had photographs of themselves taken right under the nose of a Concorde, so everybody was happy.
Just absolutely amazing. It really, really is. Look, stay there. We'll talk some more about this and the organisation. If you can just hang on there, we'll do some travel news. Back with you very, very shortly. We're talking this morning with Stephen Bath from Bath Travel, and we're remembering 40 years since Concorde's first commercial flight. It took off to Bahrain, and we're talking about the time that Stephen organised the trip from Boscombe Airfield in Amesbury, and just the memories of all of that. I mean, looking back now, Stephen, it was an incredible thing to organise. I mean, some might say even audacious. How do you feel looking back on that whole chapter?
Well, yes, the whole business of being able to charter Concorde, first of all, from a commercial point of view, is very profitable because we never had an empty seat, and we flew 4,400 passengers on 44 flights. We were always sold out, so it was a good money maker. There was always a certain element of risk as to whether it would work, and in fact, even on the day that we flew, the very first flight was the 12th of August 1998, when the aircraft flew in from Heathrow to Boscombe Down with 100 passengers. They were bussed back to the inn at High Post, and then we had to board our 100 for the big flight to America. And the problem is that it was a very hot day, and jet aircraft of all types like cold weather. They like it to be coming in at minus 60 at 35,000 feet. And it was about plus 21 degrees on that hot day. And the absolute maximum for the temperature of the air for the takeoff had to be 22.5 degrees, and I think when they took off it was 22 degrees. And the problem is that jet aircraft, when the air's hot, they can't develop so much thrust, and the runway at Boscombe Down is not quite as long as Heathrow. It's about 500 yards shorter, so it was slightly touch and go. So there's always that risk of the operational problem. Maybe the Concorde can't fly because of the temperature, and we had, of course, BBC and ITV cameras there watching it all, so luckily we managed to get off the ground.
Oh boy, yeah, your heart must have been in your mouth on that one. I wonder whether you will tell me the answer to this. How much did it cost to charter? Can you remember?
The figures are, I've got them on file somewhere. I think it was about £250,000 to charter the plane from Heathrow, and to Heathrow, Salisbury, New York, Bournemouth, Heathrow, and of course it did all that before dark.
Amazing.
It did all those 4 flights. It crossed the Atlantic twice. It moved 400 passengers. It was a lot of money. But the point is that just the flight from Heathrow to Boscombe Down on the 12th of August 1998, going up by coach and on a Bath travel bus up to Heathrow, checking in and flying back to Salisbury, it cost £250. And that included everything. Well, if I had that plane today, I could sell that for £2,500. They'd be queuing around the block.
You would. Well, look, I just wonder, just looking back 40 years, and of course we know that Concorde hasn't flown since 2003. Do you wish it was still in the air?
Absolutely. It is a great shame. Actually, I'm very honoured that every year I get invited to the Concorde Pilots Dinner, which takes place at the RAF Club in Piccadilly in London. And every year in March, all the living Concorde pilots pretty much get together for a black tie dinner. About 150 of them, all pilots, captains, first officers and flight engineers. And the only people who are allowed to go who are not Concorde pilots are the 5 people who chartered the aircraft more than 5 times, and we can go as well. And the nostalgia is tremendous. The camaraderie between the pilots is extraordinary. Every year we have a guest speaker who's somebody. Last year it was the chief pilot of Air France, of course, who sadly he was chief pilot of the aircraft that crashed, of the airline that crashed. And it's great fun. And even now, even after the aircraft's been out of commission for so long, the camaraderie is extraordinary. For example, the pilots are extremely rude to the flight engineers. They won't sit on the same tables at them, and so on. It's all in good fun, but they're an aggressive bunch.
Yeah. Look, it's fantastic to talk to you, Stephen Bath, and just look through the paperwork that you've sent me with all of these pictures and all of these prices that were on there, and it seems £259, for instance, Stansted to Salisbury. It must have seemed absolutely unreal when you were doing all of this.
It did. It was very, very exciting, and the publicity was extraordinary. And even the aircraft, the point I was going to make about the pilots is that they say that if it hadn't been for the unfortunate Air France accident, and British Airways do admit that it could have happened to them if they had also run over a bit of metal which had burst the fuel tank and caused an uncontrollable fire. It could have been flying for 10 years. There could be one flying for another 10 years, even from now, because rather like the Vulcan, if they just look after one, they could have kept it going. It could still be flying now. But of course, the real tragedy is that 113 people lost their lives in that accident, and I suppose that's what really matters. Yeah. But it is a great shame, and there's no question that technically it could still be going now.
One day, you never know. One day, might happen again. Stephen Bath, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and thanks for being with us and sharing those memories with us this morning here on BBC Wiltshire. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Jonathan Morrell,
BBC Wiltshire.